Okay, so I'm up next. Thanks, Naomi. I'm glad we got to look at some job ads because we're going to talk a little bit about job documents. Can everyone hear me and see my screen okay? All good. Okay, great. I'm Robyn Le Blanc. I'm an assistant professor in classical studies at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And in the next 10 minutes, somehow, I'm going to give you a primer on the major types of job documents that you'll prepare when you're on the market, and basically talk a little bit about how each of them contributes to the overall picture of you as a candidate in your application dossier. Okay, so these documents are basically going to be they're going to inform the committee's kind of first impression of you as a scholar and a candidate. So let's go ahead and dive right in. What you are seeing here is a list of 7 of the major types of job documents. This is maybe the maximalist list of job documents. Not every job will ask you for all of these, though increasingly many of them, particularly tenure track jobs, will. The 3 most common job materials from this list is the cover letter, the CV, and letters of recommendation. And then depending on the type of institution and the type of job, they'll add additional bits from this list. Okay, so we're gonna go through each of them. We've only got 10 minutes, so we're going to kind of do a brief dive into each of them, talk about what each of them entails, and some kind of tips and key points. Okay, so let's start with the cover letter. That's the one that you will essentially apply to every job with. Won't always be called a cover letter. Sometimes it'll be called a statement of interest or a letter of application. But in general, what this is your chance to give the search committee a sense of what you're working on, what your research is, what your teaching experience has been, not just to give them a sense, but to get them excited, okay? So the form that this takes is usually a letter addressed to either the search committee or the chair of the search committee. And it gives a overview of what your writing and publication projects are, your research interests, your teaching experience and interests, and any other projects, and then what you're going to bring to the table at the institution in terms of teaching, advising, any study abroad or types of undergraduate mentorship or research projects, things like that. The cover letter is typically 2 pages in length. Try to put it on university letterhead if you can. And this is the job document that you are probably going to write and revise the most. In large part because it's one of the most important job documents that you're going to write, but also because you often will write 2 versions of this. You'll do a research-focused one. Now, research and teaching are going to be in both, but you're going to do a research-focused one and a teaching-focused one. And then for every job you apply to, you're going to tweak it a little bit, because one of the key elements of the cover letter is to talk a little bit about what you'll do at that institution, what types of classes you'll offer, your advising, things like that. So you're going to tweak or tailor each of these to the various jobs, okay? So that's the cover letter. Now, the next application material is the CV. I'm assuming most people already have that at this point, so I won't talk about it at great length. But this is basically your academic resume. It includes your degrees, publications, conference presentations, posters, archaeological experience, digital projects, teaching experience. Often people include their research interests on here as well. All of that goes on there. Now, depending on the format that you have it in now, or if you haven't written one, it's a good idea to take a look at the CVs of other people in your field, not just academic CVs in general, but people specifically in classical studies or archaeology, to get a sense for what the sort of a range of formats is. Some people have very specific ideas about what a CV should look like, but the best rule of thumb is make it easy to read for people who are not you and people who are not familiar with your research. Okay, that's one of the best things that you can do. Now, a document that you'll often be asked to submit for tenure track jobs, for VAPs, and for postdocs is a research statement. This tends to be 1 to 2 pages, and this is your opportunity to expand on the information that you gave the search committee in your cover letter. You're going to give them a holistic overview of your research and your research trajectory, okay? So what this will include is information that talks about your past, present, and future publications. Now, really important to realize that not only does this include your dissertation and the importance of your dissertation, how your dissertation is, contributing to your field, but what comes next? Okay, you can start with step one. What happens after you defend? Is your dissertation going to turn into a book, a series of articles? If it's a book, are you going to add, subtract chapters? Are you going to refocus, things like that? But then really crucially, you need to figure out what comes next and have an idea about a few projects post-dissertation that you're able to write a few sentences about, at least, maybe even a few paragraphs, okay? This should include not just what the project is, but some publishable outcomes. For those of you who are doing digital projects or archaeology, this is also where you'll put things like your digital project, your upcoming excavation work. And again, you want to focus on what that project is and also what the publication looks like there. Because one of the things that you're trying to do here, particularly for a tenure track job, is show that you have a trajectory, show that you are going to be able to move towards tenure once you get there. Now, super, super important, it must be legible to non-specialists. It must be legible to people outside of your field. You have to sort of imagine that there are people like me. So say you're a philologist who works on Pindar. You need to imagine that there are people on the search committee like me. I'm a Roman archaeologist. I have to be able to understand what you're working on and understand how it contributes to the field, okay, and vice versa. So making sure that it's legible to people, not just in your subfield, but to everybody is really important there. Okay, teaching statement. I'm calling this teaching statement plus. This is the area where schools will tend to differ the most dramatically in terms of what they actually want you to submit. Now, the most basic kind of teaching document is the teaching statement or teaching philosophy. And that is basically 1 to 2 pages that goes over your classroom pedagogy, the types of teaching experience you've had, what you do when you get into the classroom, and also information about advising. The key here is to show, don't tell, okay? If you say, I like to do hands-on interactive activities in class, that's fantastic. Say that and then give some examples, okay? Don't freak out if you've not actually done that in class before. Either give examples of stuff you've actually done or say, this is what I would do, for example, in X, Y, and Z class, okay? So give lots of details there to kind of back up what your philosophy is. Other things that you might want to include in here, some classes that you are interested in designing and teaching at the new university, information about mentoring graduates and undergraduate students, and then depending on the other documents that you are submitting, you might want to include here information about study abroad opportunities. So if you're an archaeologist, can you take students abroad? Information about undergraduate research, and if there's no diversity statement, and we'll talk about that in a minute, you'll want to include that information in here as well. Now, they might ask you for other things. Sometimes they'll ask you for a teaching portfolio or evidence of successful teaching. And this is an area where people begin to go, oh, I don't even know where to begin with that. Totally legit. Good place to start, teaching statement and philosophy, and then layer some things on. Things that tend to show up in a teaching portfolio include the statement, course evaluations, mentor evaluations of teaching, sometimes sample syllabi, sometimes sample assignments. One of those, I think it was the University of Tennessee job ad that Naomi showed, actually was asking specifically for course evaluations and a Greek history syllabus. Okay, so hold on to the syllabi for the classes that you are teaching or the classes that you've TA'd for, so that you can use that as examples of things when you design your own material, and hold on to your course evals as well, because you might need to submit those. Okay, the next is the diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. Might go by a different name, sometimes just a diversity statement. Again, 1 to 2 pages. And what this document is intended to do is to get you to describe how you'll contribute to a classroom and or campus culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is the type of document that's going to probably vary the most from candidate to candidate, kind of depending on your own experiences and identities and how comfortable you feel disclosing and discussing those. A good place to start is to begin to think about the culture and initiatives on that university's campus. Okay, can you get a sense for some initiatives that are happening in the department or on the university? What is the culture like? What does the student body look like? So those are some good places to start to begin to think about what you can do. Again, you want to use concrete examples and details as much as possible. Talk about your approaches, your pedagogies, things you've done in the past, things that you're doing now, and things that you're interested in doing in the future. Okay, I'm running out of time, so let's talk about the last two briefly. They're pretty straightforward. Writing sample. Most research-focused jobs, VAPs, postdocs, TTs will ask you to submit a writing sample, usually 20 to 30 pages. And this is basically your research in action. Tends to be an article or a dissertation chapter, and you should work with your mentors, your advisors about what is the best or kind of most representative work for you to submit there. Finally, we've talked about this a little bit. Oops, sorry, my lights go off. There we go. Letters of rec, usually 3, sometimes as many as 5 or 6. These tend to be your dissertation advisor and other mentors. It's okay for right now if all of those people are at your university. Don't freak out about that. The one thing that I want you to make sure, though, is that make sure one of those people can talk about your teaching. Okay, and if none of those people have seen you teach, have them come to one of your classes so that they can include it. And most of the time, jobs will ask you to do that. Okay, I managed to do that in 10 minutes and 34 seconds. My final thing that I will wrap up by saying, obviously this is not a deep dive into any of these materials, but a good rule of thumb is to get lots of eyes on these materials. The more people's opinions and advice and eyes you can get on this, oftentimes the better. All right.